I'm Dolly Brunei, and I'm beginning my first podcast on a long expected series of podcasts on the subject of metaphysics, a discipline that the modern world, science, and religion are deeply in need of. Because the world, our world, the modern world, does not know where we came from. It doesn't care, does not know really what we're doing here, and doesn't care, or where we're going, or where we'll go after quote, death, and doesn't care. The church, the Christian church, teaches Christ crucified. Simple story, you believe in it, you're saved, and you don't know what that means, but you don't care. Science presumes that you don't live after death. You just die, and that's the end of it, or whatever. And these are really unacceptable. Now, when I was young, when I was like just 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, I was introverted, and I just didn't function in the physical world. And so I was looking for answers, and in desperation, I picked up the Bible, the New Testament Bible my mother had given me. And I was really amazed because this book said that there's that there's a higher world. This is not the real world, and it also said that this world is wrong. It's dead. It's asleep. And the most amazing thing to me was that the world gave me the book. The world says, this is the book. Follow the book. And I read it, and it said, the world is wrong. So that really gave me a lot of power, in the sense that I have a book that the world gives me that says the world is wrong. And so maybe it's not me that's the problem, because I was thinking it was me. I couldn't function in the world. So that was a big wake up call to me. And I read the Bible usually in small segments, but I got through the whole thing, and I got to the Old Testament, and I thought, okay, there is another world. There's a world that is not this world. This is not the real world. But I still have the same problems, so this didn't resolve my problems. So I decided I needed to look elsewhere. I didn't reject the Bible, not at all, but I thought it had been misinterpreted, which I found later it wildly had been. But I went searching, and in searching, I ended up in Berkeley, California, which was in my general neighborhood. I was from the Bay Area, and I decided I found there were metaphysical bookstores there, and regular bookstores with a metaphysical section. And so I looked in that section. I combed through them, and I found a number of books written by people from beyond the grave, with help from someone within our world. And those books were quite enlightening, because we're told that you can't communicate with the dead, because the church teaches that you can't communicate with the dead. Leave it to the church, because we're not qualified or capable of doing that. Only they can. But they don't really know what they're doing. They mean well, but they teach Christ crucified, which is nonsense. And I found a series of books called The Seth Material by Jane Roberts, which stood out among all of the others. There were a lot of good books that I read, including Theosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, Eastern religion, and a lot of just metaphysical books. And so this set of books stood out, the Seth Material. And the Seth he really brings it down to a simple thing. Your thoughts make your reality. There is no other rule. That's Seth Jane Roberts. And that sums up his teachings. Your thoughts create your reality. What I think is not just, what is that? We don't even think about what thinking is. Thoughts come out of your head. Those thoughts are making your reality. Those thoughts pull you in a 3D symbolic world or body, they pull you in the direction of where you want to go or where you're thinking. Not necessarily you want to go, but where your mind thinks you want to go because you're thinking those thoughts. So you think thoughts that pull you to where you will be. Like in one obvious case recently of the COVID pandemic, the world came to believe, for whatever reason, that there was a pandemic, and this thing called COVID was the pandemic, was the virus, never been on a human before, and yet if you look at it, you'll find that COVID means coronavirus. It actually means SARS SARS-CoV, which means severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, and corona means that it looks like there are spikes on the cells that are diseased, but actually that's science even knows that that's just they're not actually spikes. The cells are vibrating, and the spikes are shown on our equipment because the vibration is too great for the equipment to notice. That's actually scientifically known. And so if you really wanted to change your life, you might say, "Oh, SARS, COVID," and you think, but that had been around before, so it wasn't anything new. It didn't jump from a bat to a human. It was something that had been around in 2002, SARS, COVID-1 in China, and in 2012 it was the MERS virus, MERS COVID, which was Mid-East respiratory virus, same thing. So this idea that it had jumped from a bat to a human is nonsense. What had happened was that somebody got scared and thought that had happened, and their fear brought about the symptoms of cold or flu, which they call COVID. And the whole thing became just, this is a good example. I'm not trying to knock it or anything, but it's a good example of how the mind works. We attach to this virus, or the supposed virus, and then our fear draws us to it, and then we experience it. Although there weren't, but they had to look in nursing homes to find deaths because this virus is really manufactured by the society. It needed something like that. But the bottom line there is that I became closer from 1975 when I was reading the Seth material until 2020 when they had the lockdown. Our company continued to exist locked down from for remotely. So I was living at an apartment which I had taken for work, and I was able there to more closely connect with inner sources. And I did, and I connected with Seth of Jane Roberts' material, and he's a very highly advanced entity. And from there, I already knew from reading his books that Jesus wasn't crucified. That's made up for other purposes. It's sort of like the carrot on the stick, and this is why the Jews rejected Jesus, and that's true. They did reject Jesus because the Jesus message in the written Bible was not the message of the Master. The message of the Master is metaphysics. It's your thoughts create a reality. Your relatives live surround you, and everything is mind. That's the teaching, and that's the teaching Jesus taught. You can find that teaching in the Gospel of Thomas, which is purportedly written by Jesus, but my inner sources say it was. These are different sayings of Jesus, but the sayings are of Jesus, of Thomas, what they call a disciple, and of John the Baptist, who wasn't beheaded. Paul of Tarsus was not beheaded. So all of the Christian saints had to be disposed of by martyrdom. But martyrdom is actually not a something we want to celebrate. Martyrdom is suffering. It brings suffering and is suffering. And I'm giving you just an idea of what I'm going to be talking about, all these different issues. I've got books written on the crucifixion story, on metaphysics, and on other similar things. So I'm going to be discussing these things. And I'm hoping that down the road, I'll be able to get feedback from you, the listener, or the viewer, and be able to put you on this show and have a real podcast, so where that we discuss these things. And so I'm looking for really open-ended podcasting. My very first, like I said, I've done YouTube videos that are really hokey and not very good, just to get something up there. But I want to make this one better. I want to make this a really good set of podcasts that I'm going to be putting on the major channels like Spotify and hopefully Apple, Amazon, and YouTube, all those. So that's what I'm doing with this. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else I want to say before I sign off here? I'm hoping to have kind of a 20-minute dialogue with you for each one of these. This is probably a little shorter, but I'm covering a lot of material. But I'm saying here that material will be discussed on later podcasts, and including particularly there are different ones like your thoughts create your reality. There is no other rule. Science is scientific methods like taking magic pills. They find a pill to do anything. Well, that pill is really you causing you to believe that you create the resolution. It's just to change your negative thoughts to positive. That's what pills do. That's what the witch doctors did. That's what prayer does. The bottom line and the center element is mind. You create the physical world with your mind. And everything in our experience, with me, everything here is created by mind. And my mind brought me to all this. And you can see Descartes is right there. See him? He's the one who said that. He said that he couldn't presume anything. He couldn't even presume that if you think, therefore you exist. But he said that we have to have a starting place if we're going to discuss, according to Seth, there are no permanent structures. So if there are no permanent structures, we have to have a starting point to discuss what exists and what is and what will be, what was. So Descartes said, well, I think, therefore I am is a good starting point. He couldn't say for sure that was true, but if you think, and therefore you can assume that if I think, there must be a thinker, me or you, and that is the starting point. I think, therefore I am. That's the starting point. And then he went on from there and did what he did. But he didn't come. No philosopher came close to what we get from the Seth material. You create your own reality. There is no other rule. There are no permanent structures. It's the same thing that Descartes was grappling with, and what I was grappling with back in the 1970s when I first started reading the Christian Bible. I've also read the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is about a war that's about to begin, and the Lord, according to the story, the Lord Krishna, which means the Christ, Krishna, he's speaking to his to Arjuna, who's the warrior, he shoots the arrows, and that's his job. And Arjuna didn't want to fight because the other side was noble men. So the Lord, right at the middle of this great battle about to begin, teaches what he calls the Dharma, which means the source teachings, to Arjuna. And here you are in a battle. the worst possible place you could be in, and the Lord Christ, Krishna, explains to Arjuna how he has to fight, but he has to fight without attachment. He can't be angry with the other people. He knows they're good people, but he has to fulfill his duties. And the bottom line here is activity and meditation. It's a deeper thing that we'll get into later. But meditation and activity, wars are activity, and if you don't have anything better, if you can't come up with anything better than a war, then you're going to have to do the war. And just like COVID, they couldn't come up with anything better than a pandemic, so they had to do the pandemic. That's what they did. And so what we want to do is come up with better things than negative things. Come up with something good. Into war, an end of war, prosperity for all. These things are all within our grasp. And that's what we're going to discuss here. And I hope you'll come along with me on this. And I hope you'll give me some feedback, because that's what I'm really looking for. I want to get guests on this show. I'm a nobody, but I have a lot of experiential knowledge. I've worked on this for more than 50 years. And it's been my only thing. I knew back in 1975 that I had nothing to do with this world. But I was here for a reason. I had to figure that out, and I had to resolve why I was here before I can feel that I can leave it without just having more problems. So that's where we are, and I'll be here on whatever platform this is, and I'm going to try to put a logo on this and music and all that. I'm going to really try to make this a real podcast. And so I thank you for listening. I almost don't want to leave. But I'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you for listening.